Laws of the United States Civil War.
Well, don't come with an easy question. I mean, I think the cause of the Civil War was basically how government was going to run, the freedoms and what people could and couldn't do. What do you think the cause of the Civil War was? Sorry.
I'm not running for president. I want to see yours on the cause of the Civil War.
I mean, I think it always comes down to the role of government and what the rights of the people are. And I will always stand by the fact that I think government was intended to secure the rights and freedoms of the people. It was never meant to be all things to all people. Government doesn't need to tell you how to live your life. They don't need to tell you what you can and can't do. They don't need to be a part of your life. They need to make sure that you have freedom. We need to have capitalism. We need to have economic freedom. We need to make sure that we do all things so that individuals have the liberties so that they can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do or be anything they want to be without government getting in the way.
And in the year 2023, it's astonishing to me to answer that question about mentioning the word slavery.
What do you want me to say about slavery?
No, you answered my question. Thank you.
Next question.
You woke? Time to get up. So lately, you've been hearing about Nikki Haley's comments. She was at a town hall meeting, and she was meeting with some of her supporters. And one person who obviously wasn't a supporter had asked her a question about what was the cause of the Civil War. According to Nikki Haley, the cause of the Civil War now, after weeks of talking about is slavery. But what she said up front was, she said, well, we know what the causes are. I think it was about who has the right to, about the freedoms of how to operate your business and how to conduct business in the United States. In other words, because a person said you're not going to mention slavery, not once time did you say anything about slavery, and she said, of course, slavery was part of it, but I think, and that's a problem with me in the United States. Everyone wants to say slavery is a part of it. Even Ron DeSantis, who has been changing history books in Florida ever since he's been governor of the state, denounced Haley for her comments, and this is the same man who in a classroom said that the Civil War wasn't about slavery. So I don't trust the words he says. Chris Christie criticized her for that, but he said, he tried to explain that there are certain groups of individuals in this country who are, motivated by the economy. So whatever. Let me read this. This is from History Net. I think it best summarizes everything. So I'm going to read this. So y'all have to give me a few minutes here, but I'm going to read this. The secession of southern states led to the establishment of the Confederacy and ultimately the Civil War. It was the most serious secession movement in the United States and was defeated when the Union armies defeated the Confederate armies in the Civil War, 1861 to 65. Causes of secession. Before the Civil War, the country was divided between North and South. Issues included states' rights, disagreements over tariffs, but the greatest divide was on the issue of slavery, which was legal in the South, but had gradually been banned by states north of the Mason-Dixon line. Now, there are some anomalies to that. Delaware was a slave state. Maryland was a slave state. Missouri and Kentucky were slave states. And later on, West Virginia would also be one of the slave states. But we'll talk about that later. As the U.S. acquired new territories in the West, bitter debates erupted over whether or not slavery would be permitted in those territories. Southerners feared it was only a matter of time before the addition of new non-slave-holding states, but no new slave-holding states would give control of the government to abolitionists, and the institution of slavery would be outlawed completely. They also resented the notion that the northern industrialists could establish factories or any other businesses in the new territories, but agrarian southern slave owners could not move into territories where slavery was prohibited because their slaves would then be free. Now, notice that last part right there. They were upset because they can't move their business with their business model of slave or indentured service. It's not even indentured. It's slave service who were working for free on these farms into these areas. So they were upset by that. So that has been the fight I've had with several people who say, well, it wasn't about slavery. It was about money. It was about this. It was about that. And that is one of their arguments about taxation and things like that. Notice that the major motivating factor here is slavery, because I cannot move my slaves to any other territory that will be a non-slave territory. It limits my economic mobility. So it's about economy. It's about the economy. See, no, it's about slavery. Because the issue of slavery is foremost in this. The southern plantation owners were profiting off of slavery. There is no other way to put that. I don't care where I've had somebody arguing with me on TikTok, and I shouldn't bring that up because TikTok doesn't even matter, but the actual act of slaveholding was the reason why agrarian societies in the South were making any profits at all. Then they say, well, the Union started the Civil War. That's a lie, too, because let me read this part right here. With the election in 1860, Abraham Lincoln, who ran as a message of containing slavery to where it currently existed, and the success of the Republican Party to which he belonged, the first entirely regional party in the U.S. history, in that election, South Carolina seceded on December 20th, 1860, and first state to ever officially secede from the United States. 4 months later, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Texas, and Louisiana seceded as well. Later, Virginia, except for its northern counties, which broke away and formed the Union loyal state of West Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee joined them. The people of seceded states elected Jeff Davis as president of the newly formed Southern Confederacy. So now let's talk about this next section here. Now, they were upset because they saw Lincoln as an abolitionist, so then they formed and succeeded because they felt like, okay, we're finna lose. Let's just get out of the United States. We can keep our slaves and our slave agricultural societies. We can create our own laws and our own way of thinking, and we can still keep people and hold them bondage without having to worry about the Constitution or these people or the United States not giving us the right to have slaves. Yet people don't see what I'm saying there, right? Secession leads to war. Who started the Civil War? Here it goes. The Civil War officially began at the Battle of Fort Sumter. Fort Sumter was a Union fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. After the U.S. Army troops inside the fort refused to vacate it, Confederate forces opened fire on the fort with cannons. It was surrendered without casualty, except for 2 U.S. soldiers killed when the cannon exploded while firing a final salute to the flag, but led to the bloodiest war in the nation's history. So who fired first? The Confederates. This war was about slavery. The whole issue of seceding from the Union was about slavery. If Southern states secede now, which it will probably be over whether Trump loses the election or not. If they decide to leave now, black people need to flee their ass from the South. Excuse my French. I'm going to say the words the way I need to because the South cannot be trusted. They're already putting CRT in place. They believe Black Lives Matter was a problem. Trump once talked about putting troops on the street of urban cities where black people live. They think that the values of our country are being eaten away by people who are Asian, African, and Asian descent, right? So, of South America as well. So you have to be careful about what's coming in the future. But this goes back to the question of Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley, because of these particular groups of individuals that are voting Republican, who believe that lie that they were taught in schools about the war against Northern aggression, that the belief is not that the war wasn't all about slavery, it was about states' rights. And the states' rights they're talking about is slavery. she could not say that word at that moment because she realizes there are people in this country who are pulling for her, who would elect her as long as she doesn't talk about slavery. Then she came up weeks later and she said, oh, yes, it's about slavery. Here's the thing. She was condemned by her own party members for what she said because they know this is they're Republican. It's the party of Lincoln. You cannot say this is not about slavery. But she did. Because the people that she's trying to pull are the MAGA types. They are the conservatives. She's trying to get them to come to her and vote for her. Just like I talked about Mamsway. There's a danger. We have to mute the most dangerous elements of our society. Yes, I'm a progressive. But I know there are people who are farther left of me than I am. They're to the point where they will not ever believe in compromise or changing things, and I can't stand with those particular people. Same with the other side. We cannot stand with the far right, who would definitely do some serious harm to our democracy, possibly kill people and harm people, on the scale that Hitler once did. But here we have Nikki Haley, who can't even mention the word slavery because she fears not getting those votes. That is a problem in the United States. That is something we can't have in the United States. Right now, the party of Lincoln is not the party of freedom or democracy as I can see it. Well, folks, I'm all out of time. I thank you for listening to Thought You Were Woke No Speed Limit podcast. Now, if you have an issue or you want to talk about this particular thing, make sure you comment below. If you're on Spotify, please notice that there is a question attached to this podcast. Answer that question. Make sure you hit like, share, and subscribe, because if you share with other people, that means that this podcast gets out to other people. Peace. You have been listening to Thought You Were Woke No Speed Limit podcast.